I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions. I'm a mom. I work full-time, run a house, raise a 6-year-old daughter mostly on my own, and still remember to pay the bills. I'm logical. I'm practical. So when weird things started happening around my daughter, I blamed myself. Stress, overwork, single mom fatigue, whatever you want to call it. It started with her talking to someone who wasn't there. I figured it was just an imaginary friend thing. Totally normal, right? Kids do that all the time, my sister said. Mine had a whole family of make-believe people living under her bed. But with Clara, it didn't feel like pretend. There was something serious about it. The way she'd go quiet mid-conversation, tilt her head like she was listening to someone, and then nod like she understood. She'd whisper sometimes too, really soft. I only caught pieces. Things like, "I don't think she'd like that. He's not supposed to be here." Still, kids are weird. I brushed it off, but then came the drawings. She always loved to draw. I keep a whole bin of markers and crayons in the kitchen. I used to think it was cute, the way she'd scribble little scenes with her and her friends, but they changed. Suddenly, they were all black. Not the usual purple princesses or bright blue clouds. Just black. Figures. Thin, scratchy figures that filled the page, standing in corners, hiding under tables, lurking behind doors. I asked her about them once. She looked at me, serious as a judge, and said, "They watch when you sleep, Mommy." I laughed it off, but that night I locked my bedroom door. The real turning point came on a Thursday. I'd picked her up from school. She was unusually quiet. When I asked if everything was okay, she just said, "There was one on the playground. He was crouching behind the slide. No one else saw him." I looked at her through the rearview mirror. She wasn't being silly. She looked scared. That night she wouldn't go to sleep. She cried, begged me to leave the hallway light on. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard her bedroom door creak open. Soft little footsteps across the hardwood floor. I figured she just wanted to crawl into bed with me like she sometimes did, but she didn't come into the room. I looked over and saw her standing there in the doorway, frozen, silent, staring straight ahead, not at me, but toward the wall across from my bed. I sat up. "Clara," she whispered, "he's behind you." I whipped around. Nothing. No one. Just my dresser and the open closet door. But something in her voice. I swear, I felt it in my chest. I jumped out of bed, flipped every light on, checked every corner. Nothing. She wouldn't go back to her room. So we slept together that night. Well, I slept in 30-second intervals. She was wide awake the whole time, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, she said she didn't want to go to school anymore. "He's there too," she said. "They all are. I can't concentrate." I made an appointment with a child therapist the next day. He was nice enough, took notes, asked her some questions. I sat in the hallway for most of it. When we wrapped up, he came out and said Clara had an active imagination, and maybe I should monitor screen time a little more. Thing is, she doesn't even use a tablet. Never liked them. The night after that, things escalated. I was washing dishes after dinner. Clara was in the living room drawing. I could see her from where I stood. She stopped suddenly, like something had distracted her, and slowly turned toward the corner of the room. Not where the TV is, not the door, the empty corner, just drywall and carpet. She stood up and walked toward it. Then she said, almost too calmly, "Go away. You're not allowed here anymore." There was no one there. I dried my hands and rushed over. "Who were you talking to?" She looked up at me. "You can't see him. He doesn't like grown-ups." I swear to you, I felt this shift in the room, like pressure, like the air had suddenly gotten heavier. I grabbed her hand and we left the house for the night. I drove to my sister's, didn't even explain, just said Clara wasn't feeling well. That night I slept beside her in a guest bed. She woke me up around 3 a.m., tapping my shoulder. "He followed us," she said. He's standing next to the closet. There was nothing in the room, but I couldn't fall back asleep after that. I started researching things online: child psychosis, schizophrenia, paranormal stuff, Reddit threads, parenting forums. One post caught my eye. A mom describing her daughter who saw figures in the house after moving into a new apartment. Her daughter described them as smiling too wide and not blinking. The comments were full of people sharing similar stories. Some mentioned shadow people. Others claimed it was a sensitivity to something. I don't know what I believe, but 2 nights ago, I came home late from work. Clara was asleep, or at least I thought she was. I peeked in her room. She was lying perfectly still, eyes closed. I turned around to head to my room and heard her voice. Not from her bed, from the baby monitor. I hadn't used that thing in years. I only kept it plugged in because I was too lazy to take it down. Her voice was whispering from the speaker, loud enough to hear clearly. "Please don't hurt her. I'll be good." I promise. I ran back in. She was asleep, fully asleep, breathing slow, eyes shut. But her voice kept coming through the monitor. "She doesn't believe you're real, but I do. I believe you." I unplugged the monitor and held Clara for the rest of the night. She hasn't said anything since, but she stopped drawing. She won't sleep alone. She checks behind every door before she walks into a room. I don't think she's imagining things anymore. And worst of all, last night while brushing her teeth, she looked at me through the mirror and said, "Mommy, one of them is standing behind you." I spun around so fast I nearly knocked her over. There was no one, but I swear I felt breath on my neck. To this day, I don't know if she sees something real or if something is using her to get to me. But I started locking my bedroom door at night, not to keep anyone out, to keep whatever's already inside from getting any closer. I've never really talked about this before, not to anyone outside of my sister. I don't know why. I guess because even saying it out loud makes it feel too real. But there was a time about 2 years ago when I truly didn't know if I was losing my mind, or if my daughter was. Her name is Isla. She was 5 when this all started. Bright, creative, never had any issues, no developmental concerns, no weird behavior. She was the kind of kid who made friends easily and always had something to say. We had a good rhythm going, just the 2 of us. I'm a single dad, and I work from home doing freelance design, so I was lucky to be around for everything. School drop-offs, lunch breaks, bedtime stories, that kind of thing. I didn't notice anything strange at first. It started small. One day after school, Isla asked me if she could go play with her other daddy. I laughed, thought maybe she meant a kid at school was playing pretend or something. But then she said, completely serious, "He lives in the walls, but only sometimes. I call him Daddy Gray." I actually remember freezing when she said that. I asked her where she heard that name, but she just shrugged and went back to her animal crackers like it was the most normal thing in the world. I told myself it was just something she made up. Kids have weird imaginations, right? But that name stuck with me. Daddy Gray. It felt wrong. Over the next few weeks, she started mentioning him more and more. She'd say things like, "Daddy Gray doesn't like the lights on. He says you forget too many things. He told me not to tell you about the pictures." I asked what pictures? She said, "The ones we take at night, when you're asleep." That was the first time I actually felt sick to my stomach. I sat her down and told her that it wasn't funny, that sometimes when we make up stories we can scare people, and she nodded, like she understood, like she felt bad. She didn't mention Daddy Gray again. For a while. Then one night around 2 a.m., I heard the floor creak outside my bedroom. I got up thinking maybe Isla had a nightmare, but her room was empty. I searched the house. I found her in the hallway closet, sitting there in the dark, talking to herself. Only She wasn't using her voice. It was like she was whispering in this deep, gravelly tone. Guttural, like it was physically painful for her to speak that way. When I opened the door, she snapped her head toward me and smiled. Then in her normal voice, she said, "Daddy Gray doesn't like when you interrupt." I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I booked an appointment with a pediatric therapist. I didn't care if it was just her imagination anymore. Something felt wrong. We went to 3 sessions. After the third one, the therapist pulled me aside and asked if Isla had ever experienced any trauma, if there was someone in her life she could be hiding from. I said no, of course not, but the therapist said Isla kept talking about the other family, about how she belonged to them, not me, that they were teaching her things I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. I drove home in silence that day, just holding her hand across the center console. That night, I checked on her while she was asleep. She was curled up under the blanket like usual, one hand clutching her stuffed animal. But there was something on her wall. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but as I got closer, I realized it was a drawing. Dozens of little charcoal stick figures, all connected by jagged lines like tree roots. At the center of the drawing was a taller figure with no face, just a gray outline and long, sharp fingers. Written underneath in that messy 5-year-old handwriting was the word home. I asked Isla about it the next morning. She smiled and said, "They visit me when you're sleeping. They said you're just a place to stay." I called my sister that night, completely panicking. She offered to have us stay over at her place for a few days. So we packed a bag and left the house for the weekend. Things were better at first. Isla was calmer. She even laughed again. Until the second night. She was asleep in the guest room, and I was staying in the den. Around 3:15 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of whispering. I thought maybe my sister had gotten up, but when I peeked out, the hallway was empty. I followed the sound. It was coming from the guest room. When I opened the door, the whispering stopped. Isla was sitting straight up in bed, eyes wide open, her mouth moving slightly. I walked in slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, and touched her arm. She didn't even flinch. Then, in that horrible gravel voice again, she said, "It's too late now. You let them in." I grabbed her, shook her gently, and said her name over and over again until her eyes seemed to come back into focus. She blinked, looked around, then burst into tears.
She didn't know where she was. I told my sister everything the next day. We agreed to keep her for the rest of the week, while I tried to get the house spiritually cleansed or whatever. I was desperate, but the priest wouldn't even come inside. He stood in the doorway, looked around, and said quietly, "There's something ancient here. This isn't about spirits. It's something older." He gave me a number for someone else, a woman who dealt with things like this, but I never got a chance to call. That night I went back to the house to grab some of Isla's clothes. When I walked into her bedroom, everything felt wrong. The air was thick, humid. The smell of dirt and ash filled the room. On the bed, neatly arranged, were 3 drawings. Each one showed Isla, holding hands with something tall, dark, and stretched thin. The final one was of me. Only my face was scribbled out. In the corner of the page were the words, "You're not her real father anymore." I dropped everything and left. Isla's okay now. She doesn't remember much, or maybe she does, but she stopped talking about it. We moved in with my sister full time, and I sold the house within a month, but I still check her drawings. I still listen to her sleep, because every once in a while she says things in her sleep. Things like, "He still watches you from the closet," or, "They're almost done with you." I never ask what she means. I don't want to know. This happened a little over a year ago. My son, Wyatt, had just turned 6. He's always been a really sensitive kid, quiet, gentle, the kind of boy who still wants to hold your hand in public and cries during animal shelter commercials. I used to joke that he was born old, like he just came into the world already a little aware. We'd just moved into a new place. It wasn't fancy or anything, Just a single-story house outside of town with a fenced-in yard and a weird little crawl-space access door in the hallway closet. The kind with those tiny wooden stairs that lead to God knows where. I didn't think much of it. The first time Wyatt mentioned anything strange was maybe 2 weeks after we moved in. I was brushing my teeth, and he walked into the bathroom real quiet and said, "Mommy, I think there's someone living under the house." I laughed. I asked what he meant, and he said, "I hear him talking when I'm in bed," he whispers, "but it's hard to hear because he's under the floor." I figured it was just creaks or pipes or something. It's an old house. No big deal, but then it kept happening. He'd say things like, "He told me not to tell you anymore," or "He says you don't believe in things you can't see." At first I thought maybe Wyatt was picking up stuff from TV or YouTube, some creepy video or horror story, but I check his tablet all the time. He only watches cartoons and animal rescue clips. Nothing scary, nothing weird. And then he stopped sleeping through the night. Every night between 2 and 3 a.m., I'd hear him get up. He'd either come into my room or just stand in the hallway staring at the closet. One night I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "He knocks 3 times when it's safe to open the door, but I'm not supposed to open it when you're awake." I felt a chill so deep it made my stomach hurt. The next day I locked the closet and told Wyatt the man was just a dream. Nothing more. That night he didn't get out of bed, but the closet door was wide open in the morning. The lock wasn't broken. The keys were still in my drawer, and I know I locked it. I started keeping the hallway light on all night. I even installed a little motion detector camera in front of the closet, just to give myself peace of mind. For a few nights, nothing happened. Wyatt didn't say anything. I thought maybe it had passed. Then the camera app pinged me at 2:48 a.m. Motion detected, hallway closet. I was dead asleep. The alert didn't wake me until around 3:15, and by then I didn't know what to expect. I checked the footage. The closet door opened on its own, slowly. No sound, no one visible. Just the door creaking open inch by inch, then stopping. Then, for maybe 3 seconds, the camera glitched, just static. When the video came back, the door was shut again. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I told myself it had to be a malfunction, a draft, a bad sensor. But in the morning, Wyatt was already awake. He was sitting at the kitchen table drawing. I asked him what he was working on. He slid the paper across the table to me. It was a black crayon drawing of a small boy, him, holding hands with a tall, pale figure. No face, just wide, empty eyes. They were both standing under what looked like a house. The whole drawing was in black, except for a tiny red door drawn behind them. I asked what it was. He said, "It's our house. That's me. That's him. The red door is the one he opens when he wants to come upstairs." I looked closer. The red door wasn't the front door. It was in the floor. I went into the hallway closet that afternoon, opened it, pulled the flashlight out. I hadn't really looked in the crawl space before. It was dark, cramped, lined with cold dirt and old insulation. There was nothing in there, except for a single red piece of chalk sitting on one of the wooden beams. That night, I didn't sleep. At exactly 2:59 a.m., the motion alert went off again. This time, I didn't check the app. I got out of bed and crept down the hallway barefoot, not even breathing. I stood there, facing the closet. The door creaked once, just a tiny shift, like someone pulling it gently from the other side. Then, 3 knocks, not loud, not random. 3 slow, spaced-out knocks from under the floor. I stared at the door so long my eyes blurred. My whole body went cold. Then Wyatt's voice came from behind me. "You're not supposed to be here right now." I turned. He was standing in the dark, completely still. I said, "Baby, it's okay. Come here." But he shook his head. "He says you're not mommy anymore." I pulled him toward me, carried him back to bed. He didn't fight me, just stared at the ceiling. He slept fine that night. I didn't.
The next day, I unscrewed the crawlspace panel completely and pulled out every single storage bin and insulation scrap. Nothing. No signs of rodents or mold or anything human. I was starting to wonder if I was losing it. If maybe, somehow, Wyatt was making all of this up. Until last week. I picked him up from school. He was quiet, pale. I asked what was wrong. He said, "The man from the crawl space was at recess today. He stood by the fence the whole time. Nobody saw him but me. He waved at me." I asked what he did. Wyatt looked down at his shoes and said, "I waved back." I tried to pull him into a hug, but he just whispered. He smiled when I did. He has too many teeth now. That night I unplugged the camera. I locked the closet. I moved Wyatt's bed into my room. I didn't even try to explain it to anyone. There's no way to say this out loud without sounding insane. But last night, I had a dream. I was standing in the hallway, facing the closet. The door opened. Wyatt stepped out. Only, it wasn't Wyatt. It was something wearing his face, too tall, too thin. The eyes were glassy, too wide. It smiled. I woke up choking, crying. I haven't been able to sleep since. This morning, Wyatt came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. He hugged me real tight, which I loved. Then, out of nowhere, he whispered, "You were right, Mommy." I asked, "About what?" And he said, without blinking, "There's nobody in the crawl space. That was just the door to get here.